1st of August, 2025. And a lot of people in Canada are going to be taking, well, actually took today off, going to be taking Monday off as a holiday. And I didn't do a video yesterday, but there's a lot to cover. And I honestly I don't even know where to start. I have a list, and there's just so much that I can get into here. But first, I think I'm going to just go with my stories on Instagram first, just to show you. This is almost a friggin' foot-long cucumber. It's not even fully ripe yet from the garden. And I have so many more that are freaking huge. And so I've been cutting them up, roasting them, eating with them with some dressing and stuff. Anyway, delicious.
Woman bakes bread, works out, and questions the government.
So this is about a CSIS report that came out. I'm just going to refresh it. And I'm going to be sharing the woman that's part of what the CSIS was using to get the report on women of the far right being seen as radical extremists and using social media as their platform in order to get their narrative out and further radicalize other people within Canada. I can't even tell you how nonsensical this is, but I'm going to share what Jasmine Lane says about it. This is all over the media. It's absolutely embarrassing for Canada. And so I'll let her talk first, and then I'll share the video and some information on this doctor that is the one that's spewing, I would say, radical extremist views.
Bread, works out, and questions the government. They might be a national security threat. And I'm not being satirical here. This is a very real report published by CSIS. Yes, this is what they're working on, reporting that extremists are weaponizing femininity. So yes, our taxpayer-funded intelligence service has done the hard work determining that women online are using traditional gender roles, homemaking, fitness tips, and even motherhood.
Homemaking, fitness tips, and motherhood. These are what's being considered to be radical. When we have the sickest, fattest country now than we've ever had, and we're now dying at younger ages than we have even from our, we're dying younger than our parents and our grandparents. Chronic illnesses, I already talked about that. Like a huge amount of women on OnlyFans and into the porn business, and do like sexual deviance at the highest levels, and this is being glorified and propped up as sexual liberation, etc. And not having children, having multiple abortions, etc., etc., etc. And like I was saying, like also unhealthy, largely a lot of like mental health issues as well that correlate with these comorbid physical conditions that are manifested. And of course, the education system and the brainwashing and the propaganda that's going on with what's actually healthy and normal within a society and what's not. And you need the majority of a population to procreate and have more traditional conservative views and be healthy, so that can be optimized into the development of their baby and then their future development into throughout childhood, so that they can become useful members of society, valuable members of society, and not a burden on society, and in so many different ways. And so anyway, I just wanted to make that comment.
Or makeup tutorials to radicalize people. If you like to do your makeup and tell stories to your audience on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, X, whatever the heck it may be, and then you also might think to yourself that the government kind of sucks and they're kind of failing because it's really crazy that Canada is almost dead last across every sector in G7 nations. Yep, that's an entry point to extremism. Let's just get this incredibly clear. This isn't about public safety. This is about silencing conservative women. It's also about censoring dissent and framing moms and influencers as threats while ignoring all of the actual threats that face us, that actually statistically face those moms and influencers even more. Welcome to Canada, where they're not scared of actual violence or threats. They're scared of women who are conservative, who have a brain, who think, who know the data outside of a CBC News headline, who are anti-woke, eloquent, know how to speak, and therefore are kind of persuasive. And most importantly, women who cannot be controlled. And the fact that CSIS is now profiling sourdough baking moms and beauty creators should terrify you. So apparently,
it's just like using information from Justin Ling from Vice News and CBC News, an extreme radical leftist with what some people would consider to have a perverted lifestyle. But anyways, again, I'm not even judging that. It's just the fact that they're pushing that on the majority of population, and I just want to say that. So they're saying that women who are conservative or traditional, that grow their own gardens like I do, bake their own bread like I do, committed to one partner, not shaving our heads like not with these ridiculous friggin' haircuts, and walking downtown large areas wearing, either being completely straight up nude. So that's okay. That's not radical. That's not extreme. That's not deviant, perverted behavior. No, a man can have a raging friggin' hard on and hairy balls out for everyone to friggin' see, not to be graphic, or women that shouldn't even be wearing what they're wearing, but these fishnet stocking things, like showing their breast, it, like for everyone to see. No, that's not radical, with the septum friggin' rings, the tattoos all over the friggin' face, and like oh my god. Oh my god, and the fetish gear and the kink stuff and the bondage stuff and the friggin' pretending you're a furry, and oh, I'm polyamorous, whatever you want to call it, and it's like, no, that's not deviant, that's not radical. Yeah, that's absolutely going to advance society. They're absolutely going to be I got cut off. That's the first time. Maybe internet in Canada, they don't like what I'm venting about. But no, I'm just saying, like there are people that are more traditional or even dress more conservative or traditional, and they see what people on the extreme left are wearing, and they think that that is radical. And again, even with like the wearing the leashes and the collars, and like those furry masks and stuff like that, like out in public. And like I was saying before, I don't know if you heard that, but like with the gangbang stuff, like it's just so freaking weird. And uh and a society needs the majority to procreate in order to maintain and advance the society. And so I'm gonna share the report from Global News by Stuart Bell, this friggin' beta. I'm telling you, this is the first time this has happened. I'm getting kicked out of my stream anytime I want to share something. So here's the Globe and Mail with Stuart Bell, Global News, fake news media. But yeah, so CSIS was using Justin Ling to corroborate what they were calling far right extremism, because people were opposed to the mandates and the lockdowns and the extreme measures and the forced inoculations on the entire population that was destroying lives. It was killing people, it was causing injuries. There was an increase in suicides and maids. There was an increase in addictions, increase in domestic violence, increase in so many different things during this time. And so people were finally, there was a movement, and then during that, the government at the top, they wanted people within CSIS to paint this as a far right, white supremacist, radical group, fringe minority of pseudoscientists and fascists and bigots, etc. When it were people from all walks of life, all nationalities, all different types of religions and languages, etc., that were here, and they just wanted to speak to Justin Trudeau, who has spoken at so many other events, but they seem to only be ones that he agrees with, ones on the left, right? So what he doesn't want to do is talk to people on the right who are more tolerant and accepting of having a conversation where we're not screaming and yelling at people. We're just trying to provide facts and stats, objective reality, and we're having discussions with people that believe in subjective statements, subjective based on emotion, not based on facts or stats. And so this is where objective reality needs to be discussed further in government, and it's not even close at this point, and I'm going to share it. But anyways, I just wanted to get into this report first. Yeah, so weaponizing femininity, female influencers' use of social media to promote extremist narratives. And so my grandmother, who she was a nun for many years, and she fell in love with my grandfather. She had only been with one man her entire life, and when he passed away, she still didn't go with anyone else. They had 4 children. She would still go to church all the time. She worked at a nursing home. She baked, she cooked, she cleaned. She stayed at home to raise the kids, and when they were old enough, she went out and she worked. And again, to help the community, she was in a nursing home. She was one of the co-owners, whatever you want to call it, and taking care of elderly, as the name implies. And she would be considered a radical. Oh yeah, and she would walk every day. Yeah, so she would be considered a radical extremist by these clowns. Absolutely mind blowing to me. So women's workout routines that devolve into anti-government rhetoric. And again, I post, this is literally talking about me. Like I post my workouts sometimes. It's more for motivation for other people. And yeah, makeup tutorials with anti-feminist commentary, personal finance videos that blame immigrants for stealing jobs. Oh my goodness, these people are wild. According to a Canadian government intelligence report obtained by Global News, extremist movements are weaponizing femininity on social media to attract more women into their ranks. Prepared by Canada's Integrated Threat Assessment Centre, ITAC, the report warns that female extremist influencers are using popular online platforms to radicalize and recruit women. Their strategy: embed hardline messages with benign narratives like motherhood and parenting, allowing them to draw in women who weren't intentionally seeking out extremist content online. A body of open source research shows that women in extremist communities are taking on an active role by creating content specifically on image-based platforms with live streaming capabilities, it said. Again, I can't even make, this is just blowing my mind. These women foster a sense of community and create spaces that put their followers at ease, thereby normalizing and mainstreaming extremist rhetoric, according to the Strategic Intelligence Brief. So me like posting videos of my garden, hashtag organic, hashtag gardening, or like my workout video, like hashtag leg day. I'm showing a piece of equipment. I'm not showing myself. Every once in a while I'll show like a story of myself, but it's anyway. While it does not name any influencers, it refers to it refers to alt-right extremist channels, anti-government rhetoric about COVID-19 lockdowns. Yeah, so if you want to speak about the the extreme measures that were used and how much money was wasted and how many lives were impacted and destroyed, that to them is considered to be radical extremist. Why? Because the left and right media and our politicians and the experts they hired, if people actually knew the truth, the reality, what they were actually doing, supporting and enabling, and then making a lot of money off of with the kickbacks and the shares and stocks in these companies, and knowing beforehand, and then people shorting the stocks, the shares, and then like increasing it after certain events unfold and stuff like that. If people knew the truth, then again, they wouldn't trust this government, and they would never vote for liberal at this point ever again. And there would be such a need again for trust to be built back into the RCMP. Even a lot of people again have lost trust, and I'll get into more of that, why they've lost trust and faith in CSIS and so many other organizations, CBSA, because of all the criminals that are being allowed into Canada. I'm saying specifically people that have been convicted of crimes in their in other countries. I'm not talking about people coming here legally, just to be clear, and don't have criminal pasts. Most spread extreme ideology, is said, but some go further, fundraising for their cause and even inciting their followers to violence, raising concerns about possible terror attacks. You see, again, unless you give me proof, this is what I mean. They don't ever name any specific accounts, makes it so vague. And then it's like, oh yeah, and they're trying to incite people into violence. I'm sorry, but the government, they're the ones that are paying a lot of protesters as well. Anyway, weaponizing femininity. Female influencers' use of social media to promote extremism narrative. This report is dated August 2023, so exactly 2 years ago, but was only recently released publicly under the Access to Information Act. While the intelligence assessment is 2 years old, the phenomena it identifies has continued and in some ways has worsened. So this is from Evian Ledig, author of The Women of the Far Right, Social Media Influencers and Online Radicalization. And so I could go on from here. But anyways, only 2 women have ever been convicted of terrorism offenses in Canada who joined ISIS, captured in Syria. Yeah. Women have also been keenly involved in the post-pandemic far right. A third of those charged over the pro-Trump insurrection attempt at the Capitol building in Washington. See, she doesn't even know what she's talking about. She has no idea what actually happened on January 6th or during the Freedom Convoy. So even with that and alone, why would CSIS even utilize her expertise hating on traditional women? Clearly has a bias. Why would you trust that instead of looking at actual people that are part of the, international security analyst community? No, can't do that. And I'll tell you why too, because how people are hiring in Ottawa, especially for government jobs or people working with government as part of like human rights officer, like investigators, they're looking for a certain community, and they've been known to have a biased view against traditional roles, conservatives, white men, and in the hiring process even. So let's see before I stop this ridiculous article. Yeah, certain bloggers promote xenophobic and anti-2S LGBTQ TOI plus rhetoric under the guise of expressing concern for children's well-being. Like, absolutely disgusting to try to spin that when we're talking about radicals, people that follow Sharia law, that do not consider women to be equal, that are totally okay with underage marriages, which are largely correction, young girls being sold to older men as, in marriage, female genital circumcision in some countries, and again, like not even allowing women to work or drive. They're having to wear burqas, cover their faces, cover their bodies, etc. And I'm so these, to me, this is not compatible with Canadian culture or society, and so I don't understand why that's hard for women to hear when I'm saying, like, they don't consider you to be equal. They don't consider you to be worthy of rights and freedoms and liberties like a man. I don't understand why, if you're I would say libertarian, but sorry, liberal. I don't understand why if you were liberal, you would be okay with that. And they also think that being homosexual is punishable by death. So again, the nonsensicalness of this, where people that are part of the 2SL, GB2OI, XYZ community would support certain radical groups, extremists, from coming into Canada in large percentages, especially since 2020. And they it's punishable by death to be homosexual there where they live, and they are pushing that narrative in Canada as well. And I've given examples, so to call that out, and then giving gender conversion therapy to children. That's not informed consent. Their brains are not fully developed yet. They don't see beyond their own immediate present. They don't look at long-term forecasts or predictions. Like, they don't have the capacity. Our brains are only fully developed by the age of 25. And so, like, cutting off breasts, cutting off genitals, hormone blockers, hormone therapies, these are all they cause harm. And a lot of the times, like, a lot of people say that it's not the majority, but I'm saying there's still a lot of times where it is irreversible damage and harm that are done to children. And so by saying that, like that, I don't understand how that could be considered radical. I feel like that is like, that's what someone that is normal and healthy, what they would also come to the same like agreements or concurrence with. Like, I hope this makes sense. Correct me if I'm wrong, please, because if I'm right out of her with this, then I would like to know. But I've had these conversations with people, and they're in agreement with me, and these are not radical extremists at all. And these are people that vote from whatever party. Like, I know people that have voted Bloc, NDP, Liberal, PPC, Conservative. I don't know anyone that's voted Green yet, in person, or Libertarian. But anyway, they are obviously out there, and I would have the same conversations with them as well. But anyways, yeah, so baking bread and working out, which helps your health, which makes it where you're less of a sick care patient, where we have billions of, like, so much money that's being spent on our sick care system for people because of lifestyle choices. And for me to say that, I'm sure would be considered to be radical or extreme as well. And so it just blows my mind. Oh, wrong button again. Sorry, I don't mean to sound negative. I like sharing this information because we're so friggin' censored in Canada. And it's just like, it's almost like a uni-party conversation that's happening. Like, people are literally in echo chambers here in Canada. It's being reinforced by politicians, experts, education systems, mainstream media. Absolutely needs to be defunded, just like they're doing in the US. And a lot of these companies wouldn't even survive, these media companies, without our taxpayers' dollars. And so let's stop that if we could. Yeah, so this is Dr. Evian Ledig.
When it comes to defining the far right, I tend to focus on both the side of ideology as well as different organizations. So ideology would be those that promote extreme nationalism, nativism,
Speed it
and
up.
authoritarianism as a
Set it up.
combination of those. And then in terms of organizations, I look at the really long history and legacy of different types of far right organizations. So this could be, say, political parties, which is much more common in Europe, but also it could be social movements or different online cultures and communities, as well as offline cultures and subcultures. So I look at these two combined in terms of both ideology and organizations. And with the focus of the book, I actually turned towards the so-called alt-right, which was in many ways, I
So
argue,
she thinks like pilgrims and Amish and Mormons and people from like other countries, like she thinks that they are far right women and extremists and radicals.
the most contemporary
Like
manifestation
Sweden, Finland, Norway.
of the far right. So it's a continuing legacy of the far right. And the alt-right I describe as fitting within a certain place and time. So when I started off writing this book, it was when Trump was president. And so the alt-right was really the type of social movement amongst far-right activists that led to Trump's election and then presidency. So when I talk about the alt-right, it's more specifically within the time frame of 2016 to 2019, and primarily based in North America, although we see some connections elsewhere to Europe and Australia, for example. So the book is called The Women of the Far-Right, Social Media Influencers and Online Radicalization, and it was just published in September with Columbia University Press. And in the book, I reflect upon 3 years of doing in-depth digital ethnographic.
Just look how unhinged the left got, even with the Sydney Sweeney ad. Even though there have been so many ads from Nike and so many other organizations with men dressed as women, and pregnant men with women that are men, and morbidly obese people. Yet that is totally okay. That is totally okay. But to have an attractive blonde-haired, blue-eyed white girl, they are literally classifying that as Nazi propaganda. And so they can't understand that I would say normal people, or the majority, I don't even know how to say this without offending people. I don't mean to offend people at all. I'm really just trying to unpack like my own, like what I'm getting out of like all this stuff. And I'm seeing hypocrisy and so like I would say, like, let's say my grandmother, for example, if she saw like that ad with Sydney Sweeney, like I don't think she would have really anything negative to say, like maybe like cover up her boobs a little bit. But like my grandmother was very traditional. Like, I mean, like as in like what she wore, like she was very modest with what she wore. She was very classy and covered up. But if I was to show her that photo, I don't think her reaction would be as extreme as it would be, or shocking as if it was like like a pregnant man, or a woman looking like a man, or like a woman that's cut off her breasts for these like advertisements and stuff like that. Like I just think that people are not understanding just how like certain sides are just responding and interpreting the messaging that's going on, and people are not understanding also that this is also a way to distract and divide us and keep us fighting with each other, instead of actually focusing on holding the people accountable for who's actually doing this. Like I said before, the deep state.
Research following a select number of far-right women who are very active on social media as influencers. And so the focus is on North America, although I also look at some transnational connections to Europe and Australia and the ties between far-right women political activists within these different geographical contexts. The alt-right has a more sanitizing label to it because many of these activists started calling themselves the alt-right, even though they had the same beliefs as previous far-right movements. For example, beliefs in theories like the Great Replacement or some neo-Nazi.
She takes one sign from a guy and she's like, oh yeah, that's everyone.
Even beliefs like Holocaust denial. And that's why it became a contested term,
now we're
amongst
Holocaust deniers. Like, insane.
Community, because would we call these actors a more sanitizing label of the alt-right in terms of legitimizing their platforms, or was it really just a continuation of the far-right's activism but presented in a more friendly face? With the alt-right, it very much grew out of a online community and movement. So in the book, I argue that when we want to understand the so-called alt-right and the current far right today, it's really important to situate it within the emergence of technology and online communities. So when it comes to the focus of the book, which is the women of the far right, I first want to start off by how this drove my interest in writing the book, because when we think about the far right, it tends to conjure up certain images about angry young men, and especially angry young white men in Western societies. And when it comes to this stereotype, I knew that there were women within the far right who were playing quite a significant role within this space, and there was very little attention being placed on these women. In fact, I think the last academic book written about women in the far right was in 2002 with Kathleen Blee's book, and so I knew that there needed to be an update in terms of looking at the contemporary far right scene. And my main argument that these women play in terms of their role within the far right is that they primarily normalize and legitimize far right ideology and ideas for mainstream audiences.
Yeah, she doesn't give like the actual proof or facts for her examples. She's showing women that are promoting healthy lifestyles, women who are pregnant in a field, women who are showing their babies and saying this is what matters.
And this is what separates them from a lot of their male counterparts. So while these far-right women were also, say, providing political commentary on YouTube or offering hot takes on current events, just like their male counterparts, what drove my interest in these women was how they would present themselves on other platforms, like Instagram, for example, in order to paint this more holistic picture of themselves. So while they were doing YouTube political commentary, they were also posting about...
I know so many women in Gaspé who hunt, and that's what they wear. They... like, this is so nonsensical to me. Like, she's so ignorant as to, like, even like rural Canada. An entitled Karen.
Their dinner that they were cooking that night, or gardening with their children, and this
Clearly
type of more holistic image that I argue is part of their metapolitical strategy. And by that, I mean they're trying to push for a long-term societal change when it comes to cultural and social values, and they try to model that lifestyle for their audiences. And I think that is what separates them from, say, their male counterparts, because they are trying to model this lifestyle in which they merge both their political ideology along with their...
So she just posted a photo of a couple getting married. And I'm thinking that she thinks that that's some kind of like a societal shift, an ideological shift. I'm fairly certain that there's been advanced civilizations before, and there will be in the future. I would argue we're de-evolving as an entire world at this point. But you need to have people who get married, okay, because that also enforces to varying degrees being monogamous, all right, and then procreation, and then establishing a like a land and a home. Like this girl, again, like she's giving examples to me of what should be considered to be sought after for the majority. Anyway.
Lifestyle and branding. When I first started off writing this book, I had assumed most of these far-right women influencers were recruiting other women into the movement. I mean, why else would they not be there? But interestingly, I found that, at least on YouTube as a platform, they tended to actually have more male viewers and subscribers. And indeed, one of them had even...
Yeah, she tries to sound so smart with that. Oh, you're so clever. The majority of YouTube subscribers are male, ladies and gentlemen. So that's why there would be more men looking at women, and they're probably sick of what they're seeing on mainstream ads and stuff like that. They're probably just wanting to have a little bit of a refreshing view. But anyways, the majority of people on YouTube still, correct me if I'm wrong, is still male.
Mentioned that she looked at her YouTube analytics and she saw that 85% of her viewers were male, which was quite a shocking number to me. But then I found that at least on platforms like Instagram, in which they were using the platform in different ways compared to YouTube, for example, they tended to have a lot more female followers. And on Instagram, they would be posting topics related to health and wellness, or to food and cooking, or maybe
oh no,
to things related to child rearing and being a homemaker.
Oh, no!
And so these women are very adept at tailoring their messages towards both their male and female followers, and using various platform affordances, whether that be YouTube or Instagram, in order to try to target those audiences in different ways. Something that I think is often overlooked is in terms of how they would use notions of gender within their...
I bet you she promotes Dylan Mulvaney. Like I just can't with her hypocrisy here, with role models and stuff like that.
Narratives. So for men, they tend to focus upon aspects of
Social
masculinity. So they claim that society is anti-men, that it is controlled by feminists, and that this prohibits men from exercising their, quote, natural biological forms of masculinity, like leadership, aggression, dominance, and that if men join the far right, they can exercise these traits of masculinity and ideally find a traditional submissive wife. But then for the women, it's often narratives revolved around this notion of a sisterhood, and that if women do join the far right, they'll find that type of like-minded women who are more conservative and traditionalist in their gender norms, and be able to find that
these women are not far right. She's just classifying them that, just to be clear, because I'm not far right. I'm not right. I'm libertarian, And you'll often notice that with a lot of these female accounts, they're more libertarian as well. And so this girl is just so brutal.
Within the far right. So they're very good at tailoring their content towards both men and women in these ways. So a micro-celebrity is a term that was coined by the media scholar Teresa Sempt in 2008, and it refers to a particular tactic that online celebrities will use in order to garner interest from their audiences. And a micro-celebrity is more specifically a celebrity with a very niche audience. So I apply this concept in my book to refer to these women within the far right who are micro-celebrities within the far right community online. And micro-celebrities interestingly use specific tactics in order to seem relatable to their online audiences. So specifically, these practices are being relatable, accessible, authentic, and responsive to their followers and to their viewers. And so I apply this concept when I discuss the way that these far-right women engage with their viewers.
Sweet mother of three.
So they
Extreme.
use certain tactics, like how they might use certain affordances of platforms, for example, on Instagram, using certain features like the poll function to solicit engagement, or perhaps using a countdown sticker on posts to build sort of that anticipation for their audiences in terms of their forthcoming content. When it comes towards how they use these micro-celebrity tactics in their own content creation and production, they do so in ways to enhance their personal brands. So oftentimes they will blend the glamour of celebrity and with the intimacy of influencer culture, so that in many ways they're selling both their political ideology and their personal lifestyle. So for example, what they might do is post a behind the scenes video of, say, their honeymoon, in which they will share with their audiences their experiences. And they're literally inviting their audiences into a very private and intimate moment of their lives and showcasing that as a type of performance. And then oftentimes they will take what is a personal decision, that is getting married and going on a honeymoon, and weaponize that actually into a political act. And
weaponize it. How many people that are more conservative or libertarian or Republican, whatever you want to call it, how many of them are on OnlyFans compared to people that are on the left or in the prostitution? Anyway, I just can't with this.
They will say that society is anti-marriage, anti-traditional nuclear family unit, and that what they are doing is an act of political rebellion. So this is a prime example of how they might merge both their political ideology with their personal lifestyle. So my core argument is that these far-right women will employ these types of micro-celebrity practices as effective radicalization and recruitment strategies. And I argue that this has a really prime effect in terms of how they then normalize and legitimize a lot of far-right ideas into ways that are easily relatable and digestible to their audiences. In terms of the question about how they might use scientific approaches in their radicalization and recruitment strategies, oftentimes they will cherry pick certain scientific articles, and these are peer-reviewed scientific articles from academic journals, in order to make their claims about their interpretation of traditional gender norms. And this is a very effective practice because it not only demonstrates how they're able to construct this aura of legitimacy for their audiences, but how that is utilized to argue for truth and validation of their lifestyle and practices. They might pick a study from
so getting married, that's I would go with like organic food. No, there's no science that backs up that being healthier for us and not having chemicals and pesticides on the food and GMO. No, absolutely, organic is not superior to that, with the coating that's on these for transportation, etc. Locally grown. No, trying to be hunters and live more off the land, so that we're not promoting what's going on with animals now that are actually living in austere, disgraceful conditions, that are hooked up, from birth onwards, pumped with steroids and antibiotics and so many other drugs, and then just slaughtered in inhumane, disgusting, deplorable ways for mass consumption, for like fast food chains and grocery stores, etc. And working out, being healthy, being at a certain BMI. No, apparently that's radical and extremist and anti-science. There's so much more I could talk about, but
an academic journal which promotes this notion that men and women are happier in traditional gender roles, such as tasks within the household. And they will use this argument then.
And there are a lot of scientific studies that have also backed up that as well.
Say that women and men will be happier if the woman is a homemaker at home and the husband is the traditional primary breadwinner for the family, working outside of the home. Oftentimes, though, because they are selective in their interpretation of these scientific findings, They may not actually read the entire study and only cherry pick what fits within their narrative, or they might neglect that there actually are studies that do debunk that original study.
Yeah, the cherry pick
So
one.
it is a very selective interpretation of this scientific knowledge to fit their worldview. It also, I think, is an effective radicalization tool because oftentimes these women will be recruiting what they see as, quote, recovering feminists. So these are women who might have more secular, progressive backgrounds who might be, say, well educated and looking for what they see as the antidote to feminism. And so that for these far right women is traditionalism. And so they will actually try to use that training and that background in order then to recruit women who may not actually have pre-existing traditional or conservative viewpoints. So the concept of generational amnesia is a concept that was developed by climate change scientists, and it actually refers to the endangerment of certain biological species over several generations. So the idea, for example, is that there might be, say, a species of fish in abundance within one generation, but then there might be a depopulation of that fish for the second generation. And that second generation then witnesses that species of fish decline over a period of time until we arrive to the third generation. And so the third generation then accepts that current level of fish population to be natural, not knowing that over several generations there has been a decline over time.
Oh my God.
And so this concept of generational amnesia that's developed by climate change scientists is something that I also apply when it comes towards understanding
climate change. I can't with her anymore. Oh my goodness. So she's an absolute pseudoscientist, left woke DEI hire, and she gets promoted on so many different panels and platforms. She's spoken at education systems, institutions, and on TV. And why? Because she's pushing a radical leftist narrative that people within the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization and the higher levels of freaking government, that they're all monopolizing from and have shares and stocks in these companies that promote this bullshit. The actual pseudoscientists. So yeah, that's the woman that CSIS is using in their reports to consider more traditional and conservative women as far-right radical extremists, using their social media platforms in order to promote and enable violence. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. And she even has a friggin' website. This is what I mean. Like, these are the people that are getting hired within Canada, like as experts and consultants. And it's not even just in academia. Like, CSIS, are you friggin' kidding me? I've tried to call CSIS multiple times. I've given them tips and information. I've emailed so many different documents, and I've given my friggin' resume and nothing back. But you're gonna go off of this clown? Okay. I just want to post a little bit more on here. Just show that friggin' PDF presentation. The role of women in far right extremism. Research fellow at ICCT. Fire her. Again, she doesn't know what happened during the Freedom Convoy or during COVID, the pandemic. January 6th. So many other things. And so when people are uneducated as to our history and things that actually happened, do you really think they're going to be able to give credible information moving forward to assess anything? So look, they're posting a picture of a mother with her two kids right in front of a guy that's doing a Nazi salute. Absolutely disgusting. Yeah. Red Pill vlogs. Red Pill is the first step of radicalization in the far right. Red Pill meaning that you actually get information that kind of like dismantles or destroys the foundation by which you thought your truth was based upon. And so when you learn about 9/11, what actually happened, when you learn about Building 7, when you learn about the controlled demolitions, and so many other things, how this was a staged and planned event that did involve Bush and his brother Maverick Bush, Securicom, that involved people within the Mossad. It involved Larry Silverstein and countless others. And what was his freaking name? Giuliani. Was that the mayor at the time? Anyways, him lying about what happened as well. And there's so much footage out there that shows that there were explosions, controlled demolitions, melted steel, melted concrete. So high, like high heat events to do that, which would not be possible with the jet fuel. And again, falling in almost free fall, and NIST completely excluding that from their report, and then selling the debris from 9/11 to China within 2 weeks. And people in academia saying, like, what the hell are you doing? Like, we wanted to study these materials, and now we can't study them and research them and investigate them. It was a cover-up. Yeah, so I see here, like, mothers holding their children, kissing them. Oh no, there's a woman in a field here, pregnant. Oh my God, far right radicals. Mandatory vaccinating. Oh no, informed consent, bodily autonomy. Oh no, from a friggin' from an experimental therapeutic. No, my goodness. Talking about like not over medicating your children. Oh no. Anyway, yeah. So she sounds like she has a lot of cats. Okay. What do I want to go with now? There's just so much corruption. Actually, no, I'll start with the LinkedIn post because I'm talking about who we're hiring. We're hiring a lot of woke DEI people that have a bias, especially against the majority, or people that have more conservative traditional views, and or white men. And I've said this before. I'm backing this up. So this job, this was given to me. It was one of my notifications for my. I get email notifications for job opportunities that sort of align with the work I've done in the past. And so this was an email I got, and I'm like, oh, human rights officer, this is interesting. So I clicked it, and it says Ottawa, Ontario, posted 2 days ago. 49 people clicked to apply, promoted by hire, and I'll show who it is. But look at the average salary, $137,000 a year for a year, and on site. And so this is a human rights officer. So the Canadian Union of Public Employees, CUPE, is actively seeking a qualified individual to fill a temporary position of senior officer to work in the human rights branch of the National Office of the Canadian Union of Public Employees, located in Ottawa, Ontario, our swamp. The assignment will begin immediately and is expected to continue until May 1st, 2026. Listen to this. Despite the fact that Canada is majority white still, and within that, there's approximately 50%, whatever you want to call it, of men. And so tell me that this is not racism and discrimination at its finest. So as a bona fide occupational requirement, this position is designated for people who identify as one or more of the following groups: Black and racialized people, Indigenous people, women, persons with disabilities, and 2S LGBTQI plus people. So if you are a white man, need not apply. This is what I mean. These are not merit-based positions. These are not merit-based positions. And when there's already people coming with a bias to investigate human rights violations based off of their lens and perspective, and what they're being indoctrinated to believe without doing their own research and assessments based in objective reality, this is harmful. This is harmful. And this is what Ottawa's doing right now. Literally, this was posted 2 days ago for a year contract, $137,000. And I think this is so discriminating. And I actually did share this with people on my social media, and a lot of people did say the same thing. Like, how is this not racist? How is this not discrimination? How is this not a human rights violation? So just like the hypocrisy in that as well. And the guy that promoted this was an RMC alum, so from the military college. Absolutely mind blown. How is that not a human rights violation? Like right there. And so, like, again, CSIS, only because of an access to information request that was put in, did we get the all the reports regarding what they were sharing during the Freedom Convoy and why they justified declaring the Emergency Act, which was unlawful and unconstitutional, and what they were using to justify it was Justin Ling, an ex post, and an article he wrote, and with no names, no proof, no anything. And so this is from the House of Commons. In Canada, there are a lot of people there that are very misinformed, not there based on merit. So the rise of ideologically motivated violent extremism in Canada, if you want to read this whole report, I will link it. But ideologically motivated violent extremism is on the rise in Canada, and its effects are being experienced throughout Canadian society, including by elected officials. Indeed, in its 2021 report, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, CSIS, said ideologically motivated violent extremism represents a societal issue requiring a whole of government approach. According to CSIS, the COVID-19 pandemic has, so they're not talking about the increase in the break and enterings, increase in violent protests, from a specific side. They're not talking about all of these other issues that I've talked about, and the catch and release of and protecting people here, people who've even raped people or were trying to elicit sex from minors. They didn't want to give them the sentences they deserved or deport them because it might impact their immigration process. I can't. So they're talking about COVID-19 because, again, they're still lying about what actually happened because the investigations that would need to be done, Nuremberg 2.1 still needs to happen. Or sorry, Nuremberg 2.0. There has not been a 2.0 yet. Anyway, so since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, IMVE activity has been fueled by an increase in extreme anti-authority and anti-government rhetoric. It's not anti-authority, anti-government. It's because you guys were pushing anti-science propaganda and psyops and locking people in their homes, causing things to be a lot worse, destroying businesses, destroying families, and enforcing masks when it did not stop the spread, and was causing more of a buildup of carbon dioxide, especially in the brain. These microplastics that were found deep inside people's chest cavities, causing chest issues, not aspirating needles, not looking at the data about the waning immunity of these therapeutics, and about how there was a weakened immunity, like the more you got, and then all the various reports that were shared. So this has nothing to do with anti-authority or anti-government. This is, you guys are pushing harmful impositions on people, a whole society that's harming them and causing a lot more damage than good. And we're just speaking out on it because you don't care, because you're making money off of it. And I'll get into the grifters, but so yeah, if you talk about that, you're obviously in their consideration a radical extremist. Weaponization of conspiracy theories. A number of Canadian influencers and proselytizers have emerged with IMVE movements. These IMVE influencers promote misinformation and action, including violence. This is such fucking bullshit. On 10 February 2022, the committee adopted the following motion: that pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committees undertake a study of the rise of ideologically motivated violent extremism in Canada, that the study includes an investigation into the influence of foreign and domestic actors in funding and supporting violent extremist ideologies. Yeah, look at a lot of people within the House of Commons for that. Use of social media to fuel the IMVE. Again, it's just bullshit. What is ideologically motivated violent extremism? Okay, so not all instances of extremism trigger a CSIS investigation. Mr. Halweg used a 3-tier model to describe what kind of extremist activities CSIS is permitted to investigate. Tier 1 activities comprise passive engagement with online and offline violent extremist content. Though it may be abhorrent, he said, much of the online content that forms the narrative of violent extremists is charter-protected free speech, and therefore the people who engage with this content fall outside CSIS investigative mandate. Tier 2 activities see individuals transitioning from being passive content consumers to producing and disseminating extremist propaganda. Again, much of what Tier 2 activities show signs of transitioning to Tier 3. CSIS focuses on indicators that people are either mobilizing to violence or potentially mobilizing to violence. These indicators include the adoption of increased operational security measures, such as moving to private chat rooms and encrypted forums. Anyways, it goes on from there. Then it gets into hate crimes and ridiculous. I will link it, but I wanted to get into, I was going to show the friggin' Dr. Evian Lytics page, but I'm not. I'm shutting it down. And this too. Yeah, so that was from our government. I don't even know how long I was off for. My apologies for that. I was still reading that document from the House of Commons, where there's absolutely no accountability, no checks and balances to select them. There's no questioning. There's no, like what they did over COVID, Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine. Okay, so this is from Canada. Or the Times of Israel. I'm afraid to go home. Canadian IDF soldiers fear fallout from war crimes, from war probes. Canada's probe into the Israel-Hamas conflict doesn't explicitly target Israelis, but it's clear scope has alarmed Jews amid rising international lawfare against soldiers. This is from the Times of Israel, posted the 20th of July. When Nati Haberman was given back his phone in March after weeks of reserve duty on Israel's northern front, he was inundated with messages from friends about a website he'd never heard of. People were texting me saying, "Watch out, your name is on it." He said it was findidfsoldiers.net, a site created in February by David Mastrossi, a Canadian journalist who has harshly criticized Israel, accusing it of orchestrating a planned genocide in Gaza. I'm getting kicked out a lot. There has to be a reason for this. I'm going to connect to that. I don't know if it's going to be out of the stream or not, but let me see if this bounces me out. Nope. So people were texting me saying, "Watch out, your name is on it." He said it was findidfsoldiers.net, a site created in February by David Mastrossi. I don't know how you pronounce that, but anyways, Canadian journalist who has harshly criticized Israel, accusing it of orchestrating a planned genocide. Yeah. Maybe I'll see if I could just share it and you can read it. And then it won't bump me out. So I don't want to get bumped out again, but there are RCMP is funny at this point. The RCMP are conducting investigations into multiple Canadians who went to Israel as part of the IDF for supporting and enabling them, and they are being investigated into the possibility of them committing crimes against humanity and war crimes. So there are multiple Canadians who went there and possibly did commit war crimes and crimes against humanity that might get charged for it, might go to jail for this. I don't know. There should be accountability for people that do that, especially if they weren't even there in an official capacity. And it's not helping. Also in that regard, talking about Gaza and Palestine, Trump's not happy with Canada yet again because we have Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney who decided just in the last 24 hours to discuss the fact that they do recognize a Palestine being a state. I do as well. I think they have the right to live in their land without being occupied and without getting genocided. And so I am not a politician, and I am not the Prime Minister of Canada that's dealing with tariff trade negotiations right now, where I think it's today, we're going to be possibly seeing like a 35% increase in tariffs. And again, we're trying to negotiate a friggin' trade deal that's not finished yet. So I don't know why he would say that now when he clearly would know, unless he's living under a friggin' rock, that Trump, again, he's not for this two-state solution anymore. He has done a 180 on what he promised, and he's trying to like paint it as like, Hamas shouldn't be rewarded with having Palestine be a free state. Like, are you friggin' kidding me? And so he was saying that by them having that stance, that it's not good for Canada. And again, this is probably just smoke and mirrors and just more of a way to cause like division and distraction. And the fact that Mark Carney, again, within a few days of like going to the table with trade negotiation, what the frig is wrong with him? What the hell? This guy is not smart, right? Or he's just really smart and he knew that this would collapse the deal. And like, I don't know if that's what he wants. Well, that's what you're getting. And so why couldn't he wait? And so, yes, Keir Starmer, there's people within Europe that are also recognizing Palestine as its own independent state. They did it after the trade deals and the negotiations were complete. They did it after. It was after, not before, after. So oh my goodness. And so it's good that there's a stance being taken in that regard, but at the expense of Canadians in Canada, it wasn't the time. Wasn't the time. Okay, I'm going to get back into my story so I don't miss anything here. Man, today is a day. I hope I don't have to give up Starlink. But anyways, I'm in Canada. I'm literally just like an hour outside of Ottawa. I'm in the swamp. I want to see if I can even share this. I'll try my Instagram first. All right, I want to see if you can hear this. Again, just like another timely video. These are two Jewish people talking right now. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So I guess now CSIS can paint me as a radical and justify censoring me. I'm just kidding. I don't think it's CSIS. I joke about the CIA as well. I don't think I'm that important or on their radar yet to be considered for investigation.
Ariel Sharon withdrew from Gaza and Hamas took over. And I remember thinking like, oh, this is going to be what an interesting moment of opportunity. You almost have an experiment set up. You have, here's what happens to the Palestinians if they choose a radical route, Hamas. But in the West Bank, here's what happens to you if you choose a more moderate.
Right.
And what happened in the West Bank then was not the flourishing of rights. It was the building of more settlements. It was the empowering of settler violence. It was the crushing of the Palestinians' authority to do anything. And I understand, it felt like that was the moment that hope was removed in any real way. For me, that's when I went, oh, I think I don't believe anymore.
I mean, the Palestinian politician who Israelis loved the most was a guy named Salam Fayyad. He was the most moderate Palestinian leader, the most opposed to any armed resistance at all. And when he left Palestinian politics in 2013, he did an interview and he basically said, Israel has defeated me. I did everything they wanted. I couldn't stop settlement growth for a single day. And he said, you know who's going to be empowered by this? Hamas, right? If you actually want to keep Israeli Jews safe, and you want to weaken Hamas and you want to make sure that a terrible day like October 7th never happens again, you need to stop criminalizing and killing Palestinians who fight for their freedom in accordance with international law in an ethical way. But our government and the Israeli government do exactly the opposite.
How, Peter, it's to me, like I can, if there's there are Jewish people who are conservative or thinking a different way out there who are right now boiling with rage at us.
When you treat people equally under the law and you don't submit one group of people to brutal racism and oppression, everybody is safer because everyone can participate in government. And I don't understand why it is that some American Jews think that equality under the law is right for us, but wrong in Israel and Palestine.
They would say that they have it. They would say that they have it. I've heard them say it. They've said it to me. They've said to me, you don't understand Arab Israelis. They're doctors.
I know, right. But this is why we
keeps kicking me out. So this is the statement from the Prime Minister's office. Let me see if I can share it first. Okay. Statement by Prime Minister Carney on Canada's recognition of a Palestinian state, July 30th, 2025, Ottawa, Ontario. Canada has long been committed to a two-state solution, an independent, viable, and sovereign Palestinian state living side by side with the state of Israel in peace and security. For decades, it was hoped that this outcome would be achieved as part of a peace process built around a negotiated settlement between the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority, as in like the 1967 agreement. Regrettably, this approach is no longer tenable. Projects for a two-state solution have been steadily and gravely eroding, including by, so this is when he's talking about the pervasive threat of Hamas terrorism to Israel and its people, culminating in the heinous terrorist attack of October 7th, 2023. And Hamas's longstanding violent rejection of Israel's right to exist as a two-state solution. So again, right from the get-go, even that within that first paragraph, and Hamas was funded by the West and by Israel, as well as terrorist organizations. But again, I'm lumping the people that are funding this as traitors. And then there was even calls made on the radio for people to stand down and not have a response. Like these are people within the Israeli government. And so for hours, they were ordered not to respond to certain events. They were firing on their own. Hamas wanted to release the hostages early on, and Netanyahu did not want to have that. He wanted to extend this war and commit a genocide because, again, he was being investigated for his own crimes. And he was getting a lot of money out of this, and so were his friends and his family. And so the more you extend the war, the more you get funding and aid from so many different countries, but especially the U.S., and it's absolutely reprehensible what has been done since October 7th and how October 7th was even enabled. And again, disgusting things happened on that day. No one's saying that it didn't. There were also disgusting things happened before and afterwards. So the accelerated settlement. Oh, and by the way, sorry, like I almost said, they're trying to go off of the 1987 or the 1988 charter. And in 2017, that was absolutely updated. And it does talk about separating or differentiating between Zionist extremists and Jewish people, and promoting Judaism, and saying that this is about, again, like Zionist extremists and not Jewish people or or other people within Israel, and that they did accept a two-state solution, and more. And so again, does our government or our House of Commons not know that? Do they not know what's actually going on? Do they not actually know anything about, again, the reality of what's gone on, even with Russia, Ukraine, and 9/11, January 6th, the Freedom Convoy? This is what I mean. Like, it's alarming just how I'm fearing that they're just so ignorant, and it's impacting us. The accelerated settlement building across the West Bank and East Jerusalem, while settler violence against Palestinians has soared. Actions such as the E1 settlement plan and this month's vote by the Knesset calling for the annexation of the West Bank, the ongoing failure by the Israeli government to prevent the rapidly deteriorating humanitarian disaster in Gaza with impeded access to food and other essential humanitarian supplies. People are blaming the UN for that as well. And then it goes on from there. I just want to see if I'm still on. But, oh, and now I'm being bumped out. Look at that. All right, that's fine. I'll just go on to Instagram for more stories. So this is what I was talking about.
Canadians who went to go fight for the IDF in Israel are worried about coming home and being tried for war crimes. If you're worried about being tried for war crimes, maybe have you considered that you might have accidentally been a part of war crimes? And there seems to be a lot of people trying to conflate this with Judaism itself. There are a lot of non-Jewish Zionists. But if you are a Canadian citizen, somebody who was born in Canada, raised in Canada, you are Canadian, and you went to a foreign country to fight in their war, regardless of whether or not you have a passport for them, you left our country to go fight a war for another country, and you committed war crimes, and you're worried about coming back, and you're concerned, maybe you should have never left in the first place. Because, yeah, the RCMP is going to be investigating this with the possibility of uncovering international crimes such as genocide, war crimes, or crimes against humanity. So, yeah, if you're saying that you're afraid to go home, that probably means that you know that you did something that you shouldn't have done. You made that choice. And listen, I grew up in Thornhill. I have a lot of Jewish friends. I know what happens. A lot of young Jewish boys in Canada essentially get honeypotted. And when you do your birthright trip, they surround you with these good-looking IDF girls. They swoon all over you. You feel so important. You feel so powerful. And they convince you to sign up as a reservist. But then when Israel goes to war and starts murdering civilians, guess who has to be part of it? Not you. You could choose to stay home. If you then make the active choice to leave Canada and go participate in that war, you cannot be scared about coming back to Canada and being responsible for what you did at war. You're not over there fighting Canada's war. The Canadian government, the Canadian military did not sanction your activities, your actions. And once again, this is not a criticism of the Jewish people, of Judaism. And if you call it anti-Semitic, that's just sad because you literally have no other way to talk about this. If you're worried about being investigated for committing war crimes, maybe you should have never committed them in the first place. End of story. Canadians who went to go fight for the IDF in Israel are worried about coming home and being tried.
Look, I'm noticing there's multiple comments on my Rumble feed, but I'm not. Oh, now my video's back, but I'm not seeing any of them in my live chat. But when I go on to my actual Rumble channel, I'm seeing it. And so, hello to everyone that commented. I'm sorry, I will review it, but I just wanted to keep on with this. And I actually went on because I was going to start putting in the links to different things that I talked about today. So this was, I was going to share this from my Instagram, if it will even play, but it was 22, at least 22 Canadian diplomats fired last year. No police called. I'll let Ezra discuss this, and I have my dog trying to come in.
Being a diplomat, for example, if you work in the Canadian embassy in China for even just a few years, you are working for the interests of Canada, supposedly. But the minute you're done, your ability to sell your services to either side of that equation in the private sector is enormous. Imagine saying to a Canadian investor into China, hey, I know the ropes. I have all these connections from being a diplomat in Beijing. Or imagine saying the opposite. Imagine saying to the Chinese side, well, I am connected in Canada. I know how the embassy works. I know how the security side works, the trade side works. That is a moral hazard, an ethical hazard. It's one of the problems of the foreign ministry, and it was ever thus. But what about people who go beyond ethical questions? I mean, by the way, if you're wondering if that ever happened, I put it to you that Jean Chrétien, when he retired as prime minister, within 6 weeks went to work as a lobbyist for communist China. Do you remember that? Anyways, what about people, though, who can't wait till they're retired before selling their connections and influence? What about diplomats who literally start selling influence or embezzling or selling visas while they work for the government? Joining us now to talk about this and the number of diplomats who have been
Before I get into that, just because there were like great comments, and so Section 3.1 of the Canadian Human Rights Act identifies the following prohibited grounds of discrimination. This is based on that human rights officer position that I was talking about, like for Ottawa. And so race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender, identity or expression, marital status, family status, genetic characteristics, disability, and a conviction for an offense for which a pardon has been granted or in respect of which a record suspension has been ordered. But anyway, Section 7 of the same act reads, it is a discriminatory practice, directly or indirectly, to refuse to employ or continue to employ any individual on a prohibited ground of discrimination per Section 3. So based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, age, sex, everything that was mentioned before. And so by completely excluding white men from being able to apply for that position, I would consider that to be a human rights violation. So that's correct. And so, but we'll see other human rights violations that are being allowed to pass and not getting any form of accountability for. But we froze bank accounts during the Freedom Convoy.
fired for
And
it.
we arrested people. And we put them in the courts for years.
Is our friend Franco
And they might go to
Terrazzano, the
jail.
boss,
More
Canadian
people.
Taxpayers Federation. He joins us now via Ottawa. Franco, good to see you.
Hey, Ezra, thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure. You know, I really think of that Beijing embassy because that was the starting point of so many lucrative careers for consultants. But what we're talking about here is something more dastardly, actual crimes. Tell us a little bit of the story that our friends at Blacklocks broke this morning.
Yeah, well, shout out to Blacklocks. I mean, they're doing some great investigative journalist work, right? Showing you how governments are wasting and spending your money. And like, look, this is gross. I really felt sick to my stomach reading this story, just knowing how hard Canadians work for the money they earn and the taxes they pay. And meanwhile, you have 22 Canadian diplomats that were fired, okay? Some of the allegations or some of the reporting that Blacklocks looked into, by the way, from records from the Department of Foreign Affairs, soliciting kickbacks. Gross.
Yeah.
Falsifying receipts so that they can claim allowances. Misusing government-issued fuel cards. Falsifying travel expenses. I mean, this really is some gross stuff that was reported by Blacklocks. And again, they're just reporting what was in reports from the Department of Foreign Affairs itself.
You know, there's 4 words in this story that I think are even worse than what you've described. Let me read the first 2 sentences in the story. Some of it you've touched on. 22 Canadian diplomats were fired last year for fraud, theft, embezzlement, soliciting, kickbacks, and other wrongdoing, according to the Department of Foreign Affairs figures. And then here are those 4 words, Franco. No police were called.
Disgusting. No police were called. And this is from a CBSA officer, but saying, like, when I posted about them getting fired, the comment was, oh my God, those ones. And then it's like lips sealed, 3 times with that emoji. And I can't say what else. Anyway.
Hang on. Embezzling.
Yeah, this is more common than people are aware of.
Selling interest, like what they're doing is, like, we don't have the details here, but maybe it's selling a citizenship visa or like a path to citizenship. Maybe it's, a kickback for a contract. Those are serious offenses that typically in the private sector, the cops would be called. But the private sector, theft is more important than PR. Here, PR rules. Imagine 22 serious crimes, and they just didn't call the police, Franco. That's crazy to me.
Well, I hope what this reporting from Blacklock's does is really kick off further, I don't know how to say, further auditing within the House of Commons, right, Ezra? Like, you'll kind of remember how the ArriveCan story, how that developed into a national scandal, where there was initial reports of the app ballooning somehow to $54 million, and then members of Parliament in the House of Commons, other people, other journalists just kept smashing some of the records around ArriveCan, and eventually it became a national scandal. So I'm really hoping that that's what can happen when it comes to Global Affairs Canada, right? Because this is one of the worst waste offenders in the entire government. Ezra, I mentioned off the top that you had 22 Canadian diplomats who were fired. But you know what my first thought was? Is why aren't more bureaucrats at Global Affairs Canada being fired, right? Who are the bureaucrats who decided to spend $8,800 on a sex toy show in Germany?
Right.
Who are they? And why aren't they fired? Yeah. Right? Who are the bureaucrats who decided to spend $12,000 on a show where senior citizens in other countries could talk about their sex lives in front of live audiences? Who are those bureaucrats, and why aren't they fired? How about the bureaucrats at Global Affairs who's approving $51,000 a month on booze? Who are those bureaucrats, and why aren't they fired? Right? So I hope what this reporting can do from Blacklock's is put a spotlight on some of the stuff going in that's happening at this department. And I hope our members of Parliament can run with it and continue to dive into the wasteful details.
Franco is absolutely on fire here. It's a pleasure to see. Hey, you know what? I have a theory for you. And again, I'm not being partisan here, but I remember when Stephen Harper was in office, and his foreign trips often were cut short, as in, they didn't stay an extra night. They would fly home at night just to avoid staying in a fancy hotel. Like Stephen Harper's entire foreign affairs style was to really limit chances for, why did you stay an $800 a night hotel kind of thing. He literally came back to, like, he would rather get on the plane and come home than risk that. That was his style. Remember, that was when Bev Oda was sacked for a $16 room service orange juice. Well, what kind of example have we had for 10 years? And now Mark Carney having 600 conflicts of interest. I think what I'm saying is a fish rots from the head down. Leadership starts at the top. So if you've got a penny pinching Scottish accountant in the form of Stephen Harper, who's making who's making an example by being frugal, versus the billionaire oligarch Mark Carney, who refuses to divest, or Anita Anand's husband, who just happens to be involved in so many government contracts. I think people get the message, which is get while the getting's good, and as long as you get away with it, you're fine. And if you're caught, no big deal. The police won't be called. I think this is a moral example that comes from the top.
Well, Ezra, first, I just want to say, look, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we're filing access to information requests every time Carney goes on a trip overseas, right? So we're going to be getting all those records in, and we're going to be exposing what type of spending the Carney government is undertaking. But, your point about the Trudeau government, and it's just massively wasteful and extravagant spending overseas. Like, look, and we all remember who it was who billed us taxpayers $6,000 per night hotel suite during the Queen's funeral in London, England. It was the Right Honorable Justin Trudeau.
Yeah.
Or how about the time that he spent $61,000 on a 2-day star-studded conference? What was the conference about? In Manhattan, by the way, fighting poverty. You know, so Trudeau was fighting poverty the only way he knew how, with selfies and room service. So we've seen so much extravagant waste over the last decade or so. It's getting out of hand. But Ezra, let's look at the big picture here, and let's just expand all of the foreign aid. Okay, the government spent $11 billion on foreign aid in 2023-24. $11 billion on foreign aid.
On woke DEI, carbon climate initiatives, and kickbacks, laundering, shares and stocks, all that stuff. Like just like literally only enabling their own portfolios. And so I can go on from there, but it's almost over anyways. Because I wanted to share a bit from retired Colonel Douglas Macgregor and his take on some things that are going on right now that I've already discussed a little bit.
World, did the EU totally bend the knee to President Trump? There's like nothing beneficial to the EU in this whole tariff trade deal that President Trump just laid out. This seems like a huge middle finger to the European Union. What is going on here with this? We're going to dive deep into that and so much more. And by the way, how did Canada suddenly become really an anti-Christian country? We're going to talk about all of that and more on the show today, but we don't want to waste any more time. We want to get right to what's going on with the wars and an update here. It's time to get an assessment of the war in Ukraine and the genocide in Gaza. How many people have died? From a military perspective, what's next in Russia? Like we talk about 30,000 foot level discussions about these wars, but militarily, like on the ground, what is next? And what's next for Israel in their Greater Israel Land Grab project, which of course has been rolled out since 1948. During yesterday's interview with Professor John Mearsheimer, Tucker Carlson sort of echoed our frustration here at Redacted when he asked this question about the number of dead Ukrainians and Palestinians. Watch.
It's weird that in 2025, we can measure everything from your heart rate to sunspots, that we don't know how many people were killed in Russia, Ukraine, or Palestine. We can't even get, I've never met anyone who can give me a hard number on Russian casualties, Ukrainian casualties, or dead Palestinians in Gaza. That's weird.
Yeah, it's weird. Yesterday, we reported how Ukraine is now allowing grandfathers to fight in the war. Zelensky signed a law allowing citizens over 60 to join the military during wartime. Recruiting over 60-year-olds, a clear sign the Ukrainian army has been decimated. Colonel Douglas Macgregor has warned us for years that the U.S. is backing the wrong wars, losing credibility by the day. Let's take a look at the scoreboard in Ukraine and Israel, where our tax dollars are being funneled right now. In Ukraine, the much-hyped counteroffensive failed. NATO is fracturing, many people calling for it to be disbanded. Now, with President Trump's 10-day deadline looming over Russia, Kiev is scraping scraping the bottom of the barrel right now, drafting men in their 60s. Russia isn't retreating. They're advancing. So why would they blink at all with this 10-day threat from Trump? Meanwhile, in Gaza, we're watching the unthinkable become routine. Ralph Nader, remember Ralph Nader, former presidential candidate, says the death toll is approaching 500,000. And now Israel has moved to annex the so-called buffer zone, land that was once Palestinian. This isn't defense, this is conquest. So what are we really witnessing here? Two wars, both sold to the public as moral crusades, but both spiraling into something far darker. Colonel Douglas Macgregor is here to help make sense of all of this. Colonel, good to see you. I just want to, I really wanted to get an assessment of where we were in both of these conflicts right now. Is there an end game here? And do you think you have a hard and fast number on Ukraine? Let's start with Ukraine first before we get to Gaza. How many Ukrainian soldiers have been killed in this? Do you have a close to a hard number of that in this war?
You're muted, sir.
Oh, you're muted.
I have a visitor right now, and she's interfering with things. She's a new arrival.
So cute.
What I was going to say is that, my sources that are on the ground, largely in Poland, to a lesser extent in Ukraine and inside Russia, They tell me 1.8 million dead is a good number for the numbers of Ukrainian soldiers who've been killed. And if you look at that number, you've got to also assume that there are at least as many wounded, probably more. And most of those wounded will never return to duty. In other words, they're so severe that they're permanently invalids. They can't contribute anymore, which explains why they're now scraping the bottom of the barrel, literally, by bringing in 60-year-old, 65-year-old men. It's a catastrophe. Now, why is this the case? Because for the last, I would say, 6 months easily, the Ukrainian military, particularly its army, but the military in general, has been failing badly against the Russians. And they are in a state very similar to the German army as it disintegrated at the end of the Second World War. If you go back to 1944 and 45, most of the heavy casualties that the Germans took came in the last 6 to 9 months of the war. That's when things are falling apart, and you have large numbers of people who are trying to
And then after the war, they were also, many of them, sent to camps and on trial, etc. And there were the stats that are out there. Again, he's going to say the same thing. It's varying degrees of accuracy, but it ranges from anywhere from 1 million Germans to 3 million Germans that were killed after the war in retaliation response to what happened during the war.
Engage, retire to new positions, or simply fall back to what they hope will be safety. And as that happens, you're seeing all the things that are being broadcast on your screen now fall on them by the thousands. I think last night it was 700 plus drones in Kiev. I don't know how many missiles and rocket artillery, but you're talking about a world in which there is no rest, a world in which there is no hiding, there is no peace, there's no concealment. And so 1.8 million is, I think, very accurate. Now, some people insist there are more dead than that. That may well be the case, but certainly not less.
1.8 million. I mean, I just dwell on that for a second, because what the Ukrainian numbers are, right? Like, Ukraine has told us like maybe 200,000 if we're lucky. I mean,
well, Clayton, Natalie, we've been dealing with this narrative that's just based on lies created by MI6 in London and CIA in Langley. They, of course, are joined at the hip with the Mossad. So you're talking about this large intelligence complex that has a media that's willing to cooperate.
And there's Canadian intelligence assets as well that are also complicit in this propaganda, psychological operations, not understanding the reality of what's going on.
So what you hear in the mainstream media, of course, are also lies, because that media is supportive of these policies. So when you look at the Wall Street banks and their owners, the private equity gurus, the oligarchs that have billions, plus the media and Hollywood, obviously.
We're finding out, because I'm not going to get into the Hillary stuff, but like I'm going to keep with Douglas McGregor, but we're finding out that it was possibly the highest levels of government, surprise, surprise, within the U.S. that conspired, reference the Russia hoax. And so information being lied about and disseminated via the CIA and the FBI. Why? Because of people like Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, who wanted them to frame it as such. So they gave an order, even though they knowingly knew it was bullshit. Again, this is absolutely traitorous behaviors and election tampering at the lowest levels, but absolutely to fabricate a story. And again, getting the highest intelligence assets involved in these lies, getting them to create these lies, this false narrative officially with their reports and stuff like that. And then countless other people within in the intelligence communities saying that this was not fact, and that being completely censored and removed, stricken from the record, emails deleted, etc. And so if people don't think that that's happening in Canada and other countries around the world, where you have the highest levels of government that are asking, but essentially telling their intelligence communities, their defense communities to either not make connections or links to actual like truth regarding COVID and the pandemic and stuff like that, but so to counter that narrative or to reinforce a narrative that they want to push, even by fabricating data. So CSIS has been doing this, and other organizations as well. and RCMP not properly following up or investigating people that are involved in this, and it's unfortunate. And Tulsi Gabbard's been calling it out. So will we see jail or court for people like Barack Obama and Brennan or Bannon? And anyways, and countless others I've named throughout friggin' the years. But they should absolutely be in jail. Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, these people. And there's enough proof to do it. And then the level of censorship, even with Zuckerberg, even admitting it, to downgrade content that was actually sharing the truth and censor and block and promote these false narratives. So utilizing the media as well, state funding, like it just blows my mind just how big this is.
Put those together, and now you have the intelligence apparatus, which is penetrated and full of what we used to call neocons. I don't know what you call them now, globalist maniacs. I have no idea, but they are 100% behind what's happening. And you have a Congress, and I would say on average, they all have a cocktail level of familiarity with reality. So they actually believe whatever they're reading in the mainstream media, and they believe whatever the assessments they're shown from the CIA and others. So the truth is dead. The only place you get the truth is to go to alternate media. Again, as I said before, people like you out there are actually searching for and finding the truth. But most people just repeat whatever the narrative is that comes down through the sources I just named.
Now, what about Russia's military strategy? Because they are not losing. They are not being pushed back along the battlefront. And in fact, when you look at the maps, it shows that Ukrainian troops are not even there to push back. They're centered along the border with Russia, not in the contested region. So why would Russia respond to a threat from President Trump? And do you think Russia has any qualms now about going up against old men? I want to ask you, maybe you can ring in on this as well. You've had experience in the Pentagon. What would you do with elderly men in your ranks?
I would give them a chance to surrender, and I'm sure the Russians will. The Russians have not been as bloodthirsty and barbarous as claimed. They've actually been very receptive to people on the Ukrainian side that wanted to surrender, and the Ukrainians that have surrendered have all reported that they've been treated well, they've been well fed,
not
cared
all.
for. In most cases, I was reading a transcript of a radio transmission recently where a Ukrainian officer in command of what was left of his company, which was very small, decided to surrender to the Russians because he said there's no way the injured men that have survived with me are going to be cared for by the Ukrainians. They have no medical infrastructure. They can't evacuate anybody. So when you go forward to the front, you fight there, and that's where you die. So under those circumstances, what are you going to do? They'll surrender. I'm sure they will, and the Russians will be happy to take it because the more people that surrender, the fewer people you've got to fight. But I think it's important for us to understand that we have lied so prolifically for so long to the Russians, they don't believe anything we say anymore. And they certainly don't pay any attention to President Trump's threats. President Trump is like the weather. It depends on which way the wind is blowing, is what he's likely to say or not likely to say. And his threats, what are they? That they're going to add sanctions. And in order to add sanctions, you're threatening the rest of the world if it does business with Russia or business with China or somebody else. It's absurd. This is all going nowhere. And unfortunately, most Americans, they just turn on the television. They go, oh, well, he's a tough guy. That's right. Let's get those guys. They don't know what they're listening to. And they don't understand it. Because right now, I can tell you the Russians are prepared for World War III. They've said it as far as they're concerned. It's already begun. We don't understand that a lot of these sanctions that we're talking about are the equivalent of warfare. You know, when you sanction countries, when you steal $300 billion of sovereign national wealth from the Russians on the assumption that you're somehow or another morally superior and can do whatever you want, you're effectively declaring war on the Russian state and its people. And that's where we are. We don't get it. Recently, I was talking to some people inside the Beltway. They said, well, you know, if this doesn't work, you know, we'll have to use Tomahawks. What? Tomahawk missiles? What, have you lost your mind? You think the Russians are going to sit there and say, oh, well, look, that's a Tomahawk. Gosh, I guess these Americans are really upset. They're going to strike First of all, they'll shoot them down. They're not supersonic. Well, some of them are, but they're not hypersonic. And they'll shoot them down, and then they'll respond. And if they're shot from Germany or shot from Poland or Lithuania, I would expect Oreshniks to come in and obliterate the point from which they were launched. Is this what we want? I don't think so.
We have a comment here that says, didn't you used to be pro-Trump? We're not here to be pro any one person or administration. We're here to talk about the reality that we live in. So you very much could like President Trump and still not like how this is playing out in the battlefield. So people are confused.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain all three of them voted for Trump. They call out things when he does things that are good, and they also call him out when he's doing things that are not good for the U.S.
Lack of tribalism.
Well, and Natalie, when I spoke to Trump privately, and this is back in November, and then in April and November of 2020, I was a very different man. This was a man who felt strongly that we should withdraw our forces from Europe. The Europeans should ultimately be their own first responders. I think he's 100% right. I thought so then. I still think so now. He absolutely rejected the notion that Russia or China posed an existential threat to us. When I argued that the real existential threat to the United States emanates from the Caribbean basin and Mexico and the drug cartels as a result of the human trafficking and drug trafficking, he agreed. That's 2020. And if you go back to when he ran for office this time around in 2024, most of what he said tracked with what he's always believed in the past. But he's gotten in there and he's done a 180-degree turn. He is clearly the hostage or captive or prisoner of the big lobbies, whether it's the Israel lobby or the war lobby or the pharmaceuticals or anything else. And I think that's where we are. And so under the circumstances, what am I supposed to do? Continue to say I love Donald Trump? Well, I like him personally, but I think he's leading us down the path to destruction now.
Yeah. You could be like these other conservative influencers who just want to do interviews with Trump administration officials so they kiss his ass and
or make excuses.
Yeah, and you know who they are. You know who I'm talking about. But we're not going to do that on this show, and because we don't have to answer to anybody, and we don't have any big back.
So yeah, I just wanted to do more updates regarding casualties and what could possibly happen in the future, and some feedback on government. And so I just want to make sure there was nothing else too topical that I'm missing. There's one more thing. I was going to share a video on AI governance in the agentic state, but no, on that note, I will leave it at that. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.